Hello and welcome to Cyfarthfa Castle Museum and Art Gallery. My name is Christopher Parry and this is another Collection Connections video. A series of videos that we bring the museum to you and we tell you about the connections between the different collection objects on display in the museum. Their connections to each other, to local heritage and to the museum building itself. So this week we are going to be looking at the collection connections between donors to the museum. So yeah, I'm standing next to this magnificent Japanese shrine from the 17th century, and it's here and it's connected to one man in particular that started a lot of the history off for this museum, and I'm gonna show you him in person right now. This is a plaster bust of Frank Trian James, and it was created by Sir William Goscombe John, the celebrated sculptor. Now this face is the face of a person that pretty much made the museum a reality. Now back in the late 1880s, when the Crochet family left Cyfarthfa Castle, many townspeople like Frank were calling for the building to have a use as a museum or an art gallery, because the town itself was, in their eyes, destitute of places of culture and of art. Essentially it was a town full of pubs, which these guys didn't want to spend their time with. So they got together and tried to use their influence as wealthy townspeople, middle class and upper class people locally, all born in Merthyr, bred in Merthyr, and worked their way up from working families pretty much. And Frank being one of those. Frank eventually lived in Pendarren House as well, which we'll get to in a second, which is another old ironmaster home in Merthyr. But Frank here was one of the first people to suggest in the winter of 1909 to hold an exhibition of art in some of the rooms of Cyfarthfa Castle. His idea was to hold an exhibition of art by Penry Williams, a local artist. I'll show you some of Penry's work now actually. These are some very early watercolours by the artist Penry Williams. Now he was born in Merthyr in 1802 and he was invested heavily in by the ironmasters to further his art education. They often at the period in time at the start of the 19th century, and even right through, wealthy industrialists would fund certain people with a bit of spark of talent to go to art school, and Penry was one of these. And so Frank Trian James was a massive fan of Penry Williams, and he would eventually kind of use his sway to get an exhibition of art of Penry Williams' art here. And so by 1909, all these different ideas about having an art exhibition culminated in them taking over a few of the reception rooms in Cyfarthfa Castle and holding an art exhibition of Penry Williams' art and of other art created locally, and they opened it up to other collectors. In 1909, the exhibition opened, but it wasn't just art it opened with. It would open with a myriad of different objects. This is Major Harry Hartley Waite Southey, and his family and he run the Merthyr Express locally. And like Frank Trian James, they too were kind of self-made Merthyr-born businessmen who would work their way up over a few generations to be quite wealthy and quite influential. And so this case beneath Southey is full of Egyptian artefacts that he himself collected, starting in 1901, but then going right through to the end of his life in 1917. When the museum opened an art exhibition, he was one of the people to donate not art but objects, because it's always the case in small towns, and Merthyr being a prime example, is once you open the doors to these things, everyone will turn up with something. So as soon as they announced an exhibition happening of art in the museum, people would turn up saying, oh well, if you're taking art, are you taking this object and that object? And eventually people like Southey would donate their Egyptian objects to be displayed alongside the art. But not only that, we would have Egyptian artefacts, art by Penry Williams and many other people. We would have collections from Asia and other parts of the world. And not only that, we would have Roman artefacts as well. Now, as I said just now, Frank Trian James lived in Pendarren House, and being interested in history and art, he was also interested in the ancient history of the town. And when he was converting parts of Pendarren House, they discovered Roman remains that would eventually be found out to be part of an auxiliary Roman fort built in Merthyr Tydfil. And so he carried out his own excavations back in the early 1900s, and this case is filled with lots of objects that he uncovered, and then put forward to be part of the museum. And you've got such things as a Roman floor tile with a dog pawing and things like that. An amazing collection of objects, and again, all donated by a local, these found locally. But again, that connection between these people and wanting to give to the museum and wanting to give to local people is pivotal to Cyfarthfa Castle Museum's collection. And it keeps going on and on, to be fair. I'm in the round room now, which is next door to the red room, and as you can see, I'm surrounded by cases full of ceramics, and the vast majority of these were all donated, again, by a local merthyr boy. His name was J.H. James, and he lived up in High Brazil, which is just near Ponsan. People locally call it a Spanish house. But he donated the vast majority of all of these ceramic pieces you see. Not all of them, but quite a significant amount. And so again, it's just showing and solidifying the fact that this collection might be quite eclectic and unique on first sight, but the one thing connecting it all is local men and women wanting to donate something that will inspire the local population in some way. And I'm now in the wedding room at Cyfarthfa Castle, and this magnificent painting depicting Cyfarthfa ironworks, or Cyfarthfa steelworks as it then was, at dusk, was painted by Thomas Prythe, another local artist who in that 1909 exhibition was featured, and this piece of work was featured. He was sent and trained and financed by Pritchard Morgan, who was another merthyr MP. And again, this is just another sign that the connections between Cyfarthfa are most intimate when you look at the donors and the people that created those objects. They link to the town left, right and centre, and without local people supporting this museum, none of this collection, and certainly none of the most interesting parts of this collection, would exist, and it wouldn't have as much of an eclectic range of objects to intrigue all our visitors all year round. So hopefully you've enjoyed this collection and you understand a bit more about how the museum objects, or at least some of them, fit together. But if you do like it, subscribe, share the video as much as you possibly can, and thank you very much for watching. Hwyl fawr.